Tragedy of the Commons is one of the topics that you will read about in today's reading assignment. Pause the video and read through the comic that is shown on your screen. A commons is something that is not privately owned, that is shared by many, and tragedy of the commons is when that commons is used unsustainably. Some of the ways that we can protect these commons or free access resources: if access is limited, for example, national parks, they let in a certain number of people each day. Reducing the population. Population size and population growth is one of our major causes of environmental problems. So if we can stop this population growth, that will help protect our free access resources. If we convert these free access resources to private ownerships, private owners may take better care of the resources, but on the other hand, they might not protect the resources. Global resources such as oceans, air, migratory birds, things like that can't be made private property. You can't take a certain area of the ocean and say, okay, I own this quadrant. And access to resources would be eliminated or reduced for people that needed that resource if it was made, if it was privatized. Another way to protect free access resources is to have laws and treaties that regulate, but at the same time you would have to have someone to actually enforce these regulations. We'll do a case study in the next class period where we do another example of tragedy of the commons and talk about some of the ways that that particular resource can be protected. The four basic causes of environmental problems, probably the biggest, is rapid population growth. Our population is growing exponentially, which we'll take a look at what that means. And unless we do something about our population growth, then we are very quickly going to run out of our resources. Unsustainable resource use, one of the terms that we will keep referring to over and over this year is sustainability, which is the idea that if we are sustainable, we are using resources at a rate that they're still going to be present for future use. The third cause is poverty, and the fourth is not including environmental costs and environment prices. You might wonder why poverty is a cause of environmental problems. Well, those that live in poverty are just trying to fulfill their basic needs day to day. Basic needs like food, water, shelter, health, education. And desperation leads to degradation of resources that are potentially renewable. For example, deforestation. Also degradation of soils, grasslands, fisheries, wildlife. Things that could be potentially renewable, but if they are used at a rate that's faster than they can be replenished, then they become non-renewable. We also tend to see large populations of those that live in poverty in our less developed or less economically developed countries. Not including environmental costs in market prices are when companies are not required to pay for the environmental costs of their goods. A company's primary goal is to maximize their profits for their stockholders, and that's a big part of capitalism. So as a result, the prices of their goods and services do not include the harmful environmental costs. For example, a fishing company is going to charge for the cost of catching fish, but does not charge for the depletion of those fish stocks for future fishermen. There are government subsidies in place. A subsidy is a tax break or a payment which lowers, once again, the cost of goods and services. So now the value of the natural capital is also not included in the market price. And when goods are cheaper and more affordable, that further encourages depletion and degradation. When we talk about population growth, population is growing exponentially, which is different from linear growth. Linear growth is when a quantity increases by a constant amount. So that's going to look like a graph with a straight line sloping upwards. Unfortunately, our population is growing exponentially. So that is when it's increasing by a fixed percentage. So you see something that starts off linear but then starts growing faster. One of the ways that we can calculate population growth, or if you want to know how long it takes population to double or any quantity to double, it works the same thing for money in the savings account. Anything that's growing exponentially, we use the rule of 70. The rule of 70 is when you take 70 divided by the percentage growth rate, and you don't change it to a decimal, you leave it as a percent. So for example, if we had a growth rate of 3%, you would take 70 divided by 3, which would be a doubling time of 23.3 years. So let's say if you have a population of 1 million and you're growing at a growth rate of 3%, then in 23.3 years you would have a population of 2 million. The question is our present course sustainable? And there's two opposing views. The first is that the world is not overpopulated. The idea is that technological advances will allow us to clean up our pollution, find substitutes for the resources that we are using, and continue to expand the Earth's ability to support more humans as it's done in the past. The second view is that environmentalists feel that we are depleting and degrading Earth's natural capital at an accelerating rate. So we're using our resources at faster rates and over larger areas than ever before in the history of our existence. And we are causing the Earth a great harm that is not going to be fixable on a human timescale. So if we are living sustainably, then that means we are using resources at a rate that they will still be present for future use. So the term sustainability refers to the capacity of Earth's natural systems and human cultural systems to survive, flourish, and adapt to changing environmental conditions into the long-term future. So what we are doing today will ensure that the same resources and services are available in the future. Nature has sustained itself by using solar energy, biodiversity, nutrient cycling, and our lives and economies depend on these same services: energy from the sun, natural resources, natural services. When we refer to resources, mainly what we're looking at are natural capital, resources and services that support us and keep us alive. So the difference between a resource and a service: resources are those materials that are useful to us. So renewable resources, water, food; non-renewable resources, coal, oil, natural gas, minerals. Whereas services are processes that we depend on: natural purification of air and water, renewal of topsoil, which are usually on a very slow scale, but we depend on these to ensure that these resources remain renewable. So natural capital includes a combination of these resources and services. The problem is we are degrading our natural capital, which means we are not living sustainably. We're using these renewable resources faster than they can be replenished or restored, or we are polluting what is available so that it's unusable. So things like deforestation, poor farming practices that lead to erosion, overdrawing groundwater, runoff of chemical waste like fertilizer or animal waste into rivers, which ultimately also run into lakes and oceans. So if we want to live sustainably, we need to stay below what is known as the sustainable yield. So it's the highest rate at which we can use a resource to make sure that we aren't reducing the available supply. Sustainable development is different from economic development. Sustainable development is meeting our present needs without preventing future generations of humans. So when we look at smart growth and the ways that we are developing our urban areas, we want to make sure that we are living sustainably. Economic development, on the other hand, is where we use the economic systems to improve the quality of people's lives and the environment. So ideally, we would be able to achieve economic development while at the same time developing sustainably.